welcome to episode 18 of the Simply Great Relationships podcast. We're so glad you could join us today. I'm Meredith Silversmith, and this is Marina, and today we are talking about how to take your intimate life from basic to simply great. It's a good topic. Near and dear to Marina's heart especially.
Yes.
Today we're going to be covering how you know when your intimate life becomes too routine, how being stuck in an intimate rut affects the rest of your relationship, why who initiates matters, I think that's a big one, and how to take your intimate life from basic to great. So some good topics we're going to cover today. Make sure you stay with us until the very end because we've got a great bonus for you and we'll tell you how to get it.
All right, so I'm super excited for today.
I'm sure you are.
What does it look like when your love life and your intimate life get too routine?
Boring, right?
Yeah.
Boring. Very little intimacy. It's really just about the sex in the sort of mechanical sense. Not a lot of spark or excitement. I mean, how would you describe it?
It's too much buffet sex, not enough gourmet sex. And it's also same place, same time, same position. Like, there isn't a whole lot of exploration. There isn't a whole lot of fun. There isn't a whole lot of attunement. There isn't a whole lot of connection. It's more to check the box as opposed to really get enjoyment out of it.
Yeah.
It's predictable. It's a limited repertoire. You're doing a limited amount of stuff that's all the same. It's almost like your love life turns into pumpkin spice latte of sexual experiences.
The PSL. We know it's PSL season.
Yeah. So
and everyone's on that. But you don't want to be basic.
No.
You don't want a basic PSL love life. You want a simply great one. I don't know what the comparison would be.
I don't know. For me, it would be I don't know, there's a coffee shop that I really love in the city that I always tell you about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And they have this, draft latte that's, on the nitro, and it's amazing. And it's, having it, it's so frothy and rich, and it's, such an experience to have it versus, a pumpkin spice latte. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I want you to have.
All right. So there you go. So Marina's going to help us today. She's going to help us learn how to take it from pumpkin spice latte to the draft latte at the coffee shop in the city.
Yeah, Calambre.
There you go. So tell us, Marina, how does being stuck in an intimate rut affect the rest of our relationship?
So, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind and the first thing I hear couples talk about when they come in and talk about this is it's just it creates a lot of frustration that comes that trickles into all areas of your relationship. You know, frustration is one of those things that's hard to contain.
Yeah.
In its segmented little compartment. So when you're experiencing that sexual frustration, we're not always super good at being ding, 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 that's the one, that's the box that's not being checked off for me.
Yeah.
It's we become just more reactive and irritable across the board, and it can cause you to be moody for no reason. You know,
yeah.
Just a lot of aggravation, snappiness.
That makes sense. I know something I hear from a lot of my couples is almost this feeling of once that goes, right? Once the sex life goes, then they can start to question fit and compatibility as a couple. Question the relationship as a whole because their intimate relationship isn't where it used to be or where they would want it to be. That's something I've noticed.
I think going along with that, it's this feeling of almost resigning to mediocre relationship, like giving in like these notions of like, oh, well, this is just what married life is like. Oh, well, this is just what sex after kids is like.
Yeah.
It's like that Debbie Downer, like, wah, wah, this is just what it's like. And you're stuck in this place that you know isn't working for you or most likely for your partner. But you almost are like, accepting of it.
Yeah, like it's normalized.
Yeah.
That's what I would think. Like it gets normalized, and especially like in the media, and we talk about that sometimes, like the messages that are portrayed in the media, you know, and sort of these societal, like, joking, half joking, you know, messages and like on the sitcoms on TV, you know, it's like this message that's put out there that isn't necessarily true. It's not necessarily normal. It may be common, but that doesn't mean that it's normal and, you know, the only way to live, to have sort of the predictable, boring, as Marina said, buffet, you know, sex life.
Yeah, because I think actually, like, in a long-term relationship, you have more opportunity to experiment, to broaden your repertoire, to really tap into fantasies, to do all that good stuff. But the social narrative seems to be like so the opposite of that. And I think the unfortunate thing is people buy into it. And then they're just like, oh, well, this is what it's supposed to be like. I'm not supposed to have a hot sex life after 10 years. I'm here to tell you today, you can, are allowed to, and will.
There you go.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about, because this is something I hear a lot of couples talk about and a lot of couples come in with, initiating.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the biggest impasses and a lot of the areas where couples get stuck is with initiating. So let's talk about why who initiates and how things are initiated matters.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I tend to see when it comes up as an issue is that one person always initiates, right? It's always one person's job, and that really can lead them down a path of feeling like a lot of different things. They can feel resentful, they can feel like very responsible, like it's entirely on them, right? They get the blame. If sex happens, it's because they initiated. If sex doesn't happen, it's because they didn't initiate. Like everything's on them. And then they're not getting that reciprocal interest from their partner, so they can feel kind of not rejected, but like not desired, not loved, like it's a one-sided interest, which is really not ideal.
Yeah. And it's like almost like the more you're locked into roles and kind of polarize each other at totally opposite ends of the spectrum of like initiator, you know, recipient, or I don't know what you title the other person, like it's rigid, it's not fluid, it's not flexible. A lot of the richness of intimacy comes from there being a lot of flexibility and open-mindedness and not this like very narrow clear-cut role definition. Another thing that matters about who initiates is that it can make the initiator feel less desired and like discouraged and feeling like, you know, well, if my partner wanted me, they would initiate because I know I initiate because I want my partner.
Yeah, like the meaning they put on the lack of action.
Yeah, and that, you know, brings up insecurity, self-doubt, like the why am I not good enough, all those really hard to reconcile feelings that again contribute to the snappiness, the shortness, the frustration, the irritability. But that can be a really, really shitty message to internalize, a really impactful message to internalize, that your partner doesn't want you or doesn't find you as attractive.
Yeah, that would be very, you know, very hurtful. And I'm just thinking of like another dynamic that plays out in that case is one person, you know, we talk about power and power differentials in relationships. If one person's initiating all the time, that means the recipient holds 100% of the power as to whether or not sex is going to happen, right? So, you sort of end up with more opportunities for one person to be rejected than the other.
Yeah, definitely. Also, the person on the receiving end, like for them, again, they're not in an easy position either. It's not like the initiator is just being vulnerable all the time, and and the other one's the meanie.
Yeah.
You know, like for them, what I hear is they can feel really suffocated, really smothered, really overwhelmed, like in a very genuine way, very overwhelmed, and like have this is where their self-doubt and questioning comes in of like, why am I not feeling as sexual, or like, why am I not, you know, why can't I meet these sexual demands or expectations, or you know, like, why are we not on the same page? Why am I not feeling how I'm supposed to feel in this relationship? So it's not easy for that person either, because a lot of times they feel a huge sense of guilt and shame that they're kind of not necessarily on the same page, and it's a burden to be the gatekeeper. It's not a fun role to be the gatekeeper. It can be really emotionally tolling, because you know when you're saying no, like you're rejecting your partner, you know that that's not an inconsequential action.
Yeah. Definitely challenging.
Yeah.
What else do you feel like can come from that? Because I know I've heard a lot of this sense of like pressure, like if I say yes, then I'm doing something I don't necessarily feel like I want to do, but if I say no, then I risk an argument happening or feeling bad, or, you know, what's that going to lead to? You know, is my partner going to seek sex elsewhere? I hear that a lot. I don't feel like I'm doing my job, quote unquote, as a partner. So it really leads down a lot of different paths.
Yeah, and I think like the common thread between a lot of these is this inherent sense of like insecurity, that because the initiation reception kind of balance is off, that there's like a disruption in the whole relationship.
Yeah.
And I think what that leads to is like this. And this is a very real thing, and like the reality is any two people are different, so they're going to have different senses of desire, but like this desire discrepancy that's, well, from my observation, a lot of times like is not like this, it's more tied to the being in these locked roles than a true like lack of desire, or like a low libido or an extremely hyperactive libido of one partner, which totally happens and is an issue that's really important to address. But it's more of like a desire discrepancy that happens because of these fixed, stuck roles and all this internalized guilt, shame, frustration that happens from being locked in these roles.
So it's really important to do something about this.
Sure is. It sure is.
What would you recommend?
I think it's really important to like create that room for both partners to initiate. And what I mean by that is like initiation looks really different between people. And sometimes, you know, when you have two people that are locked into like pursuer, distancer, or initiator, recipient, like it is very clear how the initiator initiates. It's not as clear, and it can be a lot more subtle and a lot more covert how the recipient may initiate it. Maybe a much, you know, much more turned down type of initiation. It may be, you know, it may not be like an eggplant emoji with a 7 p.m. question mark. It may just be like an extra caress, or a more amorous type kiss, or, you know, so it's like about having that conversation and creating more attunement into what each of your initiation styles looks like. Because for somebody who hasn't initiated, you're not just going to be like super overt with it.
Yeah.
And having that conversation about like, how do you initiate? How does your partner initiate? Are you attuned to each other and to the like more subtle cues of initiation is really, really important.
Yeah.
And picking up on those cues.
Making it more explicit so it's more likely, it's less likely to be missed if it's a subtle cue.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really important to, if, you know, your partner has been locked into being the recipient and you've been locked into the initiator, and now you want your partner to take a bit of initiative in initiating, to give them that room.
Yeah, definitely.
They need that platform. They need that room. They need that time and space. You can't say, well, you have 24 hours, and if this is not done by 24 hours, that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
You have failed.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's, you've been locked in these roles for a long time.
Makes sense.
So they might need some time and space to get into that groove.
Cool.
So
how do we take our intimate life from basic pumpkin spice latte to great?
So, I think the first thing is, and I always start with this, is self-exploration. It's knowing, you know, it's asking yourself the kind of questions of like, what am I missing in our sex life? What do I want to try? What do I want to bring back from stuff we used to do? Like, what are my sexual interests? What turns me on? What does it for me? What am I curious about?
Yeah.
Like, I saw this movie and there was this sex scene. Like, what intrigued me about it? You know, like, doing that, knowing your sexual self.
Yeah.
Really, really important. And then being able to discuss that with your partner.
That's the hard part, right? They're both, nothing's really, it's not that it's that easy to do the self-exploration, but talking about it can be challenging because you have to be vulnerable, right? And you want to make sure that you're creating a safe environment to discuss it. So, as always, we're going to send you back. Episode 1, be sure to download the communication tip sheet before you get into this conversation. And also, I would say, is it episode 5? Creating more pleasure in your relationship? Quite sure it's episode 5.
I think it's episode 3.
3? Maybe it's 3. We'll put it in the show notes below. Where we get really specific about creating safety when talking about, you know, your sex life and making sure everybody feels heard and not judged. And, you know, we want this to go well. So definitely go back and listen to that as well.
Yeah, and it's about just like, again, always finding what you have in common. A great, great, great place to start is with the stuff you have in common.
Not hard to agree there.
Yeah. So I think it's, you know, doing the exploration and being vulnerable, and that's a huge turn on for people. Like, this is the thing I really want people to internalize. Like, yes, this can be vulnerable, but it's also really sexy, and it's also really fun, and it's also like a great way to bring more intimacy and almost like have it as a little foreplay, have it as a little sensual way to connect, as opposed to just do your good old pumpkin spice latte, you know, Thursday night missionary position type process. So.
Yeah, for sure. So what do you think would be helpful to make sure that this happens?
So, I know people are not going to like hearing this one, but I'm really going to make a case for it. I'm going to put my lawyer hat on. Scheduling.
Yeah.
Scheduling is the complete opposite of basic.
Yeah.
Scheduling is really exciting. Like, think about the things you put on your schedule. The things you put on your schedule are the things that are really important to you.
Yeah, definitely.
Is that the message that you want to send to your partner about your sex life and about your intimacy, that it's really important to you,
Sure.
that it's a priority,
Mm-hmm.
that you want to invest more time, effort, energy into it,
Yeah, that's a good message.
then schedule it.
I believe you. I am a believer. But yeah, you know what? I've heard that same thing. I've brought this up to many couples, and some people's immediate reaction is, "Ew, no, that's so boring. That makes it like a chore. That makes it I like spontaneity. Like I hear all of these sort of reasons why it's not a good idea."
Oh, sure. I think you can name 101 reasons as to why anything is not a good idea. I think you can, if you have somebody who's, I don't know, manipulative with words enough, you could, come up with 110 reasons why kale is bad for you. But the reality is, if you schedule something, you're prioritizing it and you're looking forward to it. The reality of our busy lives, especially in New York, like we don't always have time for spontaneity. We don't always have the opportunity for spontaneity. If you have kids, again, not a lot of time, not a lot of opportunity. If you're holding your breath for sex to be spontaneous and curated and, like a movie love scene, like you're going to be holding your breath for a really long time.
Yeah.
When you're scheduling something, you're looking forward to it. Like a part of that, your own turn-on process is looking forward to it. Is knowing that there's going to be this date night and this thing that you're going to share that's going to be really exciting and turn you on. And, maybe you're going to try something new. So I think, yes, spontaneity is lovely when you have an opportunity to embrace it. But again, if you're holding your breath for it, you could be holding your breath for a really long time.
Yeah. And I do always, when those concerns come up, I know something that you and I have talked about is just, you can prepare, right? It gives you the opportunity to prepare mentally, emotionally, physically. You can be your best self going into that night or that morning or, whenever you have it scheduled, you're ready. You can do your individual work to be mentally in that place.
Yeah, definitely. And I think scheduling also allows you to divide initiation and kind of make room for co-initiation where it's not so much pressure for maybe a person who hasn't been the initiator to like pick a random time and just go for it, right? Like it's like, there's going to be a date night, it's going to be sexy, so your partner may be more attuned to your subtle ways, and it's like, it's not like all the ball is 100% in your court. It's a little bit more of a like co-initiation because both of you know that this is coming, so you're more prepared, your partner's more attuned. It just takes a lot of pressure off.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know that we had a freebie a couple of episodes ago that would be really good. How would you recommend using that? It was from episode 10, Bringing Sexy Back. The freebie was how to have a sexy, reminiscent conversation on date night. How would you integrate that?
So I think, again, like reminiscing about sexy times is a really great form of foreplay. It's I believe Snarch, who's a researcher, therapist, had this quantum theory of quantum arousal where total arousal is physical arousal plus emotional arousal. So you need both. And a lot of times, like, we really need that emotional arousal and we don't focus on it, but having that sexy, reminiscent conversation, talking about, like, really positive, really great sexual experiences you had with your partner, that's that emotional arousal.
Yeah.
That's a big part of the overall arousal.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
So I think it's a great tool. And I think the reality is the more comfortable you are talking about sex and talking about intimacy, the more comfortable you are with sex and intimacy overall.
Yeah.
Communication around it is a really big part of just being comfortable with it overall.
Yeah.
So I
Makes
think
sense.
that's a great way.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you want to kind of level up from there, sharing fantasies
Mm-hmm.
is really, really great. I don't remember what episode we talked about this, but again, a fantasy doesn't need to be a story with a beginning, middle, and end. I think a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people put pressure on themselves to be like, oh, well, my fantasy is like, and then this happens, and this happens, and this
Yeah.
happens, and then it ties up in a neat little bow, and then it's done. Like, a fantasy can be like a little snippet you have in your mind that just really turns you on. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's enough of a fantasy to share.
Yeah.
Fantasy can be something you want to try.
Mm-hmm.
A fantasy can be, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
It's not so broadly defined, but again, it's like letting your partner into who you are as a sexual being. It's
Mm-hmm.
connecting more with your own sexual self,
Mm-hmm.
and it's creating that atmosphere of intimacy that breaks that routine of pumpkin spice latte love life.
Yep, for sure. Now, I know you created a really good freebie for today, a really good bonus. What did you put together?
So, I put together an intimacy calendar
Oh,
to do at date night.
okay.
So, basically, what you're going to do is you're going to plan a really nice date night, and you're going to look at your intimacy calendar, and you're going to go, hey, the kids have a sleepover, and, you know, I'll be decompressed, I'll finish my housework, and you'll be back from your golf game, and
Mm-hmm.
we have this chunk of time. So let's schedule
Mm-hmm.
here. And let's talk about what we'd really like to get out of that experience.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about what would make it really hot. Let's talk about what would make it really sexy. Let's talk about what would break that routine
Mm-hmm.
and break that rut. Let's talk a little bit about fantasies. Let's talk a little bit about exploration. Let's talk a little bit about like all those hot things we used to do.
Yeah. There you go.
Then you throw it on. And the thing here, the important thing is this is not like a legally binding contract.
No.
Not a legally binding contract. This is just, you know, almost treated as like a little bit of that emotional foreplay.
Mm-hmm.
And just know that the goal of this is really to evaluate
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of get turned on and prioritize, and that's it.
That's awesome. Thanks, Marina.
You're
So
welcome, guys.
be sure to get that bonus. You can get it on our website at simplygreatrelationships.com/018 intimacy calendar for couples. Let's talk about takeaways. What's your takeaway?
My takeaway for today is that, like, when you're stuck in this rut of like kind of a monotonous sex life, like both people, like there is no advantageous role.
Yeah.
Like that both people are stuck in
Mm-hmm.
a pretty disadvantaged, frustrating, you know, vulnerable, not feel good position.
Yeah.
And it's really important to show your partner empathy
Mm-hmm.
because they're probably feeling a lot of the same feelings as you, just from like the opposite side of the table.
Yeah. That makes sense. That was actually going to be my takeaway as well. I'll try to think of a different one, but that really was my takeaway. Maybe I'll just have a different spin. Just how impactful it is on both sides. That, and really to expand it even beyond this particular topic, like any dynamic at play in your relationship where one person is always and one person is never is going to lead into a similar situation of this sort of disconnect of responsibility and blame and rejection and, you know, just everyone sort of not feeling so great and not feeling like a team. At the end of the day, you feel like disconnected and you don't feel like you're on the same page. So I think that plays out a lot, you know, in our sexual relationship, and that's a really big takeaway.
Yeah.
Well, that's all for today. That was a lot. Thank you, Marina.
You're welcome, guys.
So no more pumpkin spice lattes for any of our SGR listeners.
No more.
No more. Actually, if you have one, I think it would be quite funny when you're tagging hashtag PSL. A little hashtag Simply Great Relationships. A little tag us because we'd like to see you. Just kind of an inside joke for our listeners. I think it'd be funny. So that's all for today. We hope you take these tips and start using them right away. Be sure to grab the freebie. You can get it on our website, and you can use it on date night. So that'd be great. And we'd love to continue the conversation with you in our Facebook group where we're going to be sharing more tips, tricks, and live streams exclusively for our members. And Marina will be in there answering questions. If you have questions that come up after this episode or you just want to talk a little bit about it, she'll be popping in and commenting and getting back to you as well. So you can join us at facebook.com/groups/simplygreatrelationships, or you can go on our website and click the link. It's at simplygreatrelationships.com. And that is today's episode.
Yeah. Hit me up in the group, and I have plenty of great tips for kind of upping and leveling up your love life.
Yeah.
But you gotta come into the group.
Yep.
Because I don't want to disseminate it everywhere.
No. Awesome. All right. Well, until next week. We'll see you then. Bye.